folks, Ariel over here. What I am doing is finishing up making my new frost covers for my new beds. So, this is the frost cover draped over here. You can see a bunch of them are done already. And I'm just using those lengths of PVC I made. So, what I'm doing here is connecting my PVC pipes to make this long enough for to hold the covers for my longest beds. So use this purple stuff, I think it's purple primer. First, I'm going to go inside the bell. This pipe actually happened to have a bell-shaped connector built in, and then the outside of the bit that's going to go in that. If you drip this stuff on you, it will stain you purple for a long time. So be careful. And we're going to use the weld-on glue here. So wipe off the excess glue. Again, I'm going to do the inside first, just so it doesn't stick to my grass when I lay it down. Go around the outside here and join them together. Now when you first slide them together, you have to hold them actually really firmly, because they will try to spring apart for just a few seconds after you first push them together. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's what happens. They'll try to actually push out, and then once it sets, you won't get them apart again to join them more snugly. So I just hold them together firmly there for a minute or two. Now it's not trying to push out at all, so I can just lay there and dry. Some of these where I'm just using scrap PVC, so most of them actually had a bell end on one end or the other that I could use, but a couple didn't, so I'm using these little 1-inch connectors like that. I probably wouldn't even have to actually glue these together, because it's not that critical. You know, I'm not running water through my plumbing here, so it doesn't have to actually be watertight, but it would be a pain if they came apart after I have the frost cover rolled around them. If it disconnected inside there as I was rolling it back and forth, that would be a problem. So just to prevent that from happening for sure, I am putting these together. And again, I don't know if the camera shows that. It doesn't try to push off quite as bad when it's a smaller piece of pipe. But I'm going to hold that for a sec before I put the other end on. I am, of course, not a professional plumber, but again, this isn't trying to hold water or anything else other than to support the structure. See there, I did it backwards. Should have done my inside first, so I didn't have to lay that one down. Just trying to hold the structure of my frost covers together. So, some of the pipes were, too long for the little beds, so I just used a little hacksaw, cut them off, and then some were not long enough, so I used some of my cut off pieces to connect to the longer ones to make them long enough for the long beds. So I just wanted to show you how I'm doing that. To make basically a weight that goes the whole way along the bottom end. So I start with wrapping that one end and then overlap the other end a little bit more, because at that point you'll have spun the pole a bit, and if you don't, this gets really uneven and won't roll nice and straight. And at that point the middles overlap even more. So I grab the middle here and try to roll it up this nice and even, and I still don't get it exactly even. So that end has wrapped up tighter than this one. The other side of this one's already done, and all this is doing is providing a weight to hold this down in the wind. So to wrap that up, I try to hold it a bit snug, and this is the challenging thing with multiple layers of cloth, I'm using just a big fat screw. And putting it through, well, the screw itself isn't that big, but the head is, to help keep it from tearing out through the cloth. Tuck my loose ends out of the way. Come over and do the other end first and then go back and do the middle. So, wrap that around. It's a little bit helpful if I can hold the fabric snug on each side so that it'll screw through neatly. There we go. And I'm trying to size this this way so that it just about rests on top of the concrete block instead of down on the dirt, in an effort to help make the fabric last longer, because sitting in the moist dirt does deteriorate it. So, almost done with all these here. Of course, having to screw it only one spot, it tries to unwrap just a little bit. And it's not like it has to be precise. All we're trying to do is hold it in place and keep it tidy enough that it doesn't blow away, and that I can use it hopefully for many more years. My first batch I used for 4 summers, and had I been able to do this and had the raised beds to keep it out of the dirt, I think it would have lasted me more than 4 years. That unrolls just a bit, which is okay, it's still off the ground. If you come over to the end here, then you see how, because of the hoop shape, I have excess fabric here to make this come the whole way down. It seems to be working really well to actually just take this excess, because it gets a little friction on the concrete blocks, and stuff it into the concrete. And that seals the end up nice, and keeps, again, everything out of the dirt to help protect the cloth. And the cloth, of course, helps protect the veggies growing under there. So when you go to cut your lengths here for a project like this, make sure you remember, and this stuff is a bit of a pain to cut because it's filthy, it doesn't snip very well. The easiest way to cut it seems to be, now that I've done a bunch of it, to try to hold it as taut as I can and do that. Anyway, make sure you don't just measure the actual length of your bed, because if you want it to actually wrap around and seal the whole thing, you got to go up and down on the ends too. And each end on these posts for me is almost 3 feet of height. So I need to make sure I cut not the bed length, but the bed length plus 6 feet to cover the 2 ends. So think about that before you go to cut something like this, if you want it to actually cover everything, or you will cut it too short and it will not fit. And of course, it's relatively hard to make things longer again once they are too short. So just a little note to be cautious about so you don't waste your frost cloth. But that's how I'm cutting it. Goes on another one of the long beds, obviously. And by the way, it is really warm out here today. It was, it snowed and snowed and snowed. Then it drizzled rain while it snowed just above me. And now all of a sudden it's like 64 degrees, which is plenty hot for me. And if you're wondering where Burley's at, he's hiding under the swing in the shade because that is way too hot for him. But the veggies should love it, so that is good. And it's nice that it's not snowing anymore. So I don't need these today, but I could at any moment. So that is, oh, and then as far as the time of year, I continue to get lots of questions about, can't you do this or that and garden a little earlier or whatever. The season of year I'm at here right now is that my daffodils are kind of in the peak bloom and leaves are just coming out on the trees with leaves. Of course, most of the trees right around my house are pine needles, not leafed trees. But that's the season of year that I'm at right now, at the beginning of June. So if you think about when at your house, when would daffodils bloom and leaves come out on the trees, that's what I'm at right now. And I've had my whole garden planted, almost everything for 2 weeks, and then the potatoes like a week ago, just for reference. So That's probably gardening fairly early for most of you as far as what the actual season is. So you can see I have almost all of these done. It is a nice sunny day finally, and they wouldn't have to be covered right now. I was just covering each one as I go to be sure everything fits properly on the beds. I'll uncover them again here in a second, but this is basically the same frost cover setup I had on my old garden over there, just moved to the new garden and made to fit the new beds. And I think it's going to work even better than the last one did. And again, if you want to see more about what I showed originally on my first setup, I'll link below to the video I did on that. But this does work pretty well. This is a very heavy frost cloth. I use this all summer, but it's what's sold normally as a winter weight. It provides up to 10 degrees of protection, so things that can't freeze could go down theoretically to 22 degrees instead of dying at 32. And I sometimes need that all summer here. So that's my setup. Now I've just gotta put the rest together. Got my PVC pipes all laid along these last couple beds, so I just have to cut my cloth and do that same wrap each edge. Oh, and there is some extra. You wouldn't obviously need that much extra to wrap, but they only sell the cloth in certain dimensions. And I think they sold like a 5 foot, which is not wide enough to go over the circumference of this hoop. And the next size up they sold was like 12 foot, which gives me an extra foot on each end. So I'm just wrapping that extra foot around to anchor it to my pole, which is my weight and what lets me lift my covers on and off easily and kind of keep them under control when you're doing it by yourself. Otherwise, you're just trying to lay it back and forth with no weight and no support, no structure. When you get longer beds like this, you get a little bit of a breeze, it can be quite a challenge. It tries to take off in the air like a sail. So that has seemed really helpful and lets me, I can open it either direction and just roll it up, and I can do that all by myself without needing a second person here to help me with that, even when it's breezy. So here's my 2 littlest beds in the middle. You can see this one's open. You might be able to see the little baby lettuces coming through. And here is how I move this, and the same thing for the bigger beds. I untuck the ends first, where they're just tucked into that concrete to hold them down, and just grab my bar and start rolling them up. Again, this keeps it all contained and nice and tidy. This is my strawberry bed. They look happy under there. And you kind of gotta undo the wads on the end. They don't always like to roll really neatly. Go over to the other side and pick the rest of it up. And as you can see, I can lift the whole thing up and take it off. It's not anchored to there in any way other than its own weight holding it there. But just, again, for keeping it tidy and preserving the life of my cloth, I like to take this end and stuff it in there. Same thing on this side, and that just kind of keeps it contained, and it actually stays resting up on the concrete block instead of the ground. And now I can get sunlight and rain and whatever on my plants, and I can quickly unroll it back over my hoops when we've got colder weather in the forecast. I know I'm going to get asked this. I'll give you a link to where I got the frost cloth. I bought a huge roll of it because I need a huge roll to cover all my garden. These are called ladder mesh. You can get little bits of these for very expensive prices. They're not called that. I forget what they're called in a gardening catalog, but this stuff was originally sold for tying concrete blocks together. It normally lays out flat, but it's just 2 wires with little spacers in between, and it's flexible enough I can just stick the ends down actually into the concrete block, which holds it better than sticking in the ground did over there because there were so many rocks. It was really hard to get it more than a couple inches in the ground. That wouldn't hold it very secure. So this is fairly secure. You could of course use hog panels or something like that bent over your whole bed, but this makes it easy. I can reach in between them and work in between them, and these supports are still there for me to roll my cover back and forth on, and they're plenty tall enough to give the plants room to grow underneath. I was able to get, my hardware store ordered me like a 50 pack of these, and that was enough to do all the hoops across all of my garden beds, and I've been using them for many years, and they should be good virtually, forever. I should never need to replace them. Eventually the cloth wears out and I do replace that, which is what I'm doing right now, but these, for all practical purposes, do not. So I'm going to finish that up here, And because of Murphy's Law, I'm sure once I get them all done, there will be no frost in the forecast for a little while. But if I don't have it done, I assure you there will be lots. So I'm going to finish that up now, and hopefully that gives you guys some ideas if you're trying to garden in a very cold climate as well, or most of the things I do in the summer are also ways, if you live somewhere warmer, you could extend your growing season on either end of a season in the spring or fall. I just have year-round frost and snow in my location, and so I need this for my summer setup, but you may not, but it may still be helpful for you. So comment down below. I'd love to know if you guys have ever used frost covers for your garden, if you live anywhere cold, you know, how that's worked for you, and if you've ever done any setup kind of like mine. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time watching these videos. Hopefully you found something beautiful, educational, interesting, peaceful, relaxing, or useful while you were here. If so, find more videos here, subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and if you like what you found here, feel free to like and share away so that others can benefit as well. You all have a wonderful day.